Hey there guys, welcome to the meat shop. In this episode, I'm going to show you how to utilize a pork loin. They're really cheap, you can get them all over the place, and they are really versatile. You can do some beautiful things with them. I'm going to show you how to do all that stuff. So, if you guys like the video, give it a thumbs up, like, subscribe, and share it with some friends. So here we go guys, how to use a pork loin. These guys are super common. When I worked in the grocery stores, we'd blow these guys out, we'd give them away almost. So it's really, really cheap, affordable meat, these pork loins. And it's really nice, really lean meat. They take the fat caps off of these, and so they're really lean. Off of beef, this would be the ribeye and the short loin. So it's a really nice piece of meat, and you can get these on sale, like I said, so dirt cheap. So we'll just get into it. They usually come backpacked like this. Sometimes they sell them in the butt end. Sometimes they sell them in the rib end. It depends on what you're doing. If you're doing pork chops, I'll show you, I find the rib end is a little bit better than the butt end, just because it's kind of a little bit darker meat, a little more flavor and stuff like that. But we can just get into it. So you just lightly mark that so you don't cut into your pork loin. Take it out of the bag, and we'll get started on it. I'll share some of the characteristics with you. So, with this pork loin here, all pork loins are going to be this way. You are going to have a rib end. You can tell because there's always that dark piece. If you're flipping around to this side, it's a second muscle. You can see that there's that red strip there. Back here it's all white. So that's another muscle, and it's very tender. So the rib really kind of stops about there. It's about a quarter or so, and I'll bring the camera in closer before I cut this so you can see it. And then back here you have the buckeye piece. So there's a little bit more silver skin in this end of your pork loin. So, you know, if you want to do stir fry or sweet and sour pork, pork cubes, pork Slovakia, that's the end I used. So I'll just bring that camera in so you can see a little bit better. I forgot to mention, the tools you'll need for this is basically just a cutting board, a couple knives. You don't need a knife this big. You can get away with one this guy in your kitchen. And I always recommend a steel. Keeps a good edge on your knife, but I'll bring that camera in for you guys. Okay guys, here we go again. So just to recap, this end here, you can see that there's that different muscle here, and there's this different muscle that kind of runs down the side here. This angle from this side. There's this cap muscle. This is the rib end. So what I normally do, I like if I'm buying one of these and I was to do it for myself, I would take my pork chops out of this end. You can pork chop this whole thing, 1 inch, 3/4 inch from one end to another, and it's going to make really nice lean pork chops. In fact, I'll do that for you right now. I'll show you just a couple. So I always square the ends off, and we save this. You can save this for making sausage, lean sausage. Some other videos I've told you to save back fat, and we can add it to that because this is very lean for making like a sausage or ground pork. So just cut them like so. Dead simple. You don't even have to do any trimming on these guys. It's just like open the pack and start cutting. But can you guys see those pretty good? All right. So if you guys can make note, those are the 5 rib muscles. You can kind of see, and see how this one, you know, you got this big, it's a little bit darker, but it takes up about half of the pork chop. And as you go down the pork chop, that little red piece gets smaller and smaller. This one, it's barely there. And this one's pretty much a center cut pork chop. So you got those are the rib end. You get about 3/4 inch, you maybe get about 5 of those. So flip it over, see this one just has a whisker of it here. So that's a rib end pork chop. And you can continue going down the pork loin all the way that way if you want to just have a bunch of pork chops for, you know, pork and gravy or mushroom gravy with your pork chops or something like that. So easy peasy. Cutting pork chops, just open it up. You don't have to trim, go from one end to the other. And like I mentioned on this end here, you can kind of see, you kind of got this little bit of silver skin. This little muscle here is the buckeye, and it takes up, you know, about the back couple inches. So with that guy, what I'll do if I was doing this at home is I would just cut it off. Not, you know, that looks like a pretty nice lean pork chop though, right? I would just save this piece for doing, you could do cutlets out of this end. Cut them very thin. And then you could throw them in some breadcrumbs with seasonings, fry them in oil. You kind of get the last inch here, I should say, is kind of got a little extra stuff going on in the pork chop. But cut those guys very thin. See that? Very thin versus this guy. The thickness difference. So that's an option for you. Cutlets, cut them very thin. Fry them in oil. I'll save this little end here because it's kind of got a little bit connective tissue and stuff, which in pork is really pretty much tender no matter what. That's the nice part about these too, is like no matter how you cook them, they're pretty well tender. But they can be dry because they are so lean. So you got some cutlets there out of that end. Got some pork chops, easy to make. Now, this would be the center of the loin. You know, there'd be, on a beef, it would kind of be rib up till here, and then this would be your strip loin. And I'm gonna show you guys kind of some like little bit neater stuff, some value added things, because at this point you guys know you could just chop this whole thing. You could cut it into little stew cubes if you wanted to. I'll do like one little section for, or you could do stir fry strips, you know, basically cut a couple pieces of stir fry for you. Just cut them real thin like that again. Oops. And you just lay them flat. And with the stir fry like this, there's that little bit of fat and silver skin at the top, but it's really not that tough, not that chewy. You really don't have to trim it off. If you want to, you can. Just cut it into a couple strips. Boom, you got some beautiful little stir fry strips. All right, so that's another option for you. And you could cut them down if those are too big for you. And then, of course, you always can make some stew cubes or something for shish kebabs or a pork silvaki. Cut a little more to make the pile just a little bit bigger. And I always kind of press them out flat so that it's nice and even and you get a uniform cut while you're cutting. So there you got some pork stew cubes. Easy enough, and I still got a big chunk of this loin left. Look at this thing is probably, you can find them on sale for less than 10 bucks a loin at wholesale places. But I got 5 chops, I got 5 pieces of pork cutlets, a little bit of stir fry, got some stew. And out of this here, I'm gonna do some stuffed pork chops and a little stuffed pork loin roast for you. So, with the stuffed pork chops, you cut them a little bit thick. Then you'll take a smaller knife and just make an incision. You kind of leave a little bit. If you're cutting, you would just leave a little bit and a little bit on this end so that it holds together, because you're basically going to create a little pocket. And I always do it on the fat side. I never do it on the lean side from the bottom. So you open it up. So I just made a little incision there. Maybe that makes more sense to you guys now. Like so. See? And there's a little, you can maybe make that a whisker bigger if you wanted to. And you guys can stuff these with whatever concoction you want. I like to do dressing because it's easy, but if you had like jalapeno popper stuff, like say bacon, jalapenos, cream cheese, garlic, salt, pepper, you could load them in there and fry them up in the oven. But see, so we got 2 stuffed pork chops, and I'm gonna do the same with this guy. Now with these, they're a little bit bigger, so obviously you're not gonna make a bunch of little cuts like this. We're gonna make a single incision across the middle on the top side, because that fat it helps your presentation. People like that nice white fat, it contrasts real well. So you just open it up, and that's not a very big pocket, right? Like if I stuffed as much as I could in there, you're not going to get, there's all this meat. If I stuffed as much as I could in there, you still got all this meat here on this side. So what we'll do is I take my knife again and I create a side pocket inside. It might be a little bit tough to show you on camera. I'll just deepen that pocket, but then I take my knife at an angle and go into that meat. So I'm just cutting into the lean meat underneath the fat cap. So I have another pocket, flip it over to this side, cut into it, and I have another pocket. So here's that opening hole, and if you open it up, there's a secondary pocket in there. There's a secondary pocket in here I can slide my fingers into, and then one you go down into. Excuse me. So that way it can hold, you got this one, and you have another one in there. So it can hold more stuffing. And if you really want, you can take the time, you can make a whole bunch of incisions, and you could have this thing just right stuffed. So we got pork chops, we got cutlets, got a little bit of stir fry. I got some Slovakia or pork stew cubes. I have a little bit of trim. In fact, this guy should be more stir fry. Oops. It's too good, too nice and lean looking to waste. There's a little bit of connective silver skin at the top here. I'll leave that out though. Just use your discretion. If it's tough to cut through, it's going to be tough to chew. So now for the stuffing part of this pork loin. Dead simple. I just got some stovetop stuffing, you know, whatever, or you can do it right, if you got a nice stuffing recipe, you can do it right from scratch, but this stuff's easy. You just add margarine and water. Make sure it's cold though. You always want to keep your meat cold. I don't add this stuffing when it comes right off the stove. I always put it in the cooler and cool it down. You basically just take the handful. I'll do these little guys first. Open it up. Spilling on my cutlets. And make sure it's packed in there good, and like, yeah, that looks pretty good. He just took a $1 chop and turned it into a $6 chop. Same again with his partner there. So you just open up that incision we made in the pork chop, sorry. Oh yeah, and I just use the stovetop stuffing. I think it's the Kraft brand, but and you just add water and margarine. But you could add apple juice. You could add pork broth, chicken broth. All sorts of cool things. Or instead of doing stuffing, like I said, you could do like a jalapeno popper, a pork chop, what would that be called? A pork chop popper? PCP, pork chop popper. And then season it up, throw it on the barbecue or in the oven like that. But doesn't that look so yummy? Oh, it looks like a pork chop, wham! Pork chop, wham! And then, same again with this big guy. A little bit of dressing left over. Take it. One hand, open up and make sure you get that side pocket, and you really want to work it in there because this one is a little bit bigger piece of meat. So this dressing in a pork loin roast, I find helps keep them moist. This is a really nice way to do it because they are so lean. It's hard to keep them moist if you're doing them just on, like you can do it. You just got to pay attention. This way, you know, you're going to be pretty good, and it'll help speed up the cook too. A little bit. Now with this guy, you could leave him just like this. So that's stuffed. See how much bigger that's got now? It kind of looks like a little inflated balloon. And I kind of worked that in there pretty good. But you could leave that bulbing out. It would kind of look like a lobster tail coming out of the shell sort of idea. And I cleaned the little breadcrumbs up around. But now it's stuffed. I got pork stuffing in my pork loin here. I got stuffing in my pork loin there. And what you can do, which is dead simple, is just a couple toothpicks, which I'm grabbing right now. A couple toothpicks and some string. And all you do is just, let's bring this closer. Focus on here. You just poke it through underneath the meat, come through to the other side. Oops, and poke it through. And do that a couple times. Poke through. Poke through. If you guys had a butcher needle, you could do that instead, but I'm assuming most of you don't. So you just grab some toothpicks, stick them through like so. Can you see them there? Like that. Get this stuff out of the way here. take your butcher string, cut yourself off a bit, and then just thread it on like so, like a football, kinda, like football strings. So you see that guy there? So I go to that first toothpick, then I cross them, pull it snug a bit, cross them again, pull it snug a bit, cross them again, pull it snug a bit, and cross them one final time, and then just tie a regular old knot to seal it up. And that really looks good. Then we will cut the excess string off. So how about that, guys? A stuffed and tied pork loin. Dead simple. You just see me do it in 2 minutes, and you can do it in 2 minutes too. You're gonna impress your guests, throw a little salt, pepper, garlic, paprika, whatever you're into on there. So there you go, guys. There's a bunch of different ways to utilize a pork loin. 5 pork chops, 5 cutlets, half a pound of stew, half a pound of stir fry, 2 beautiful stuffed chops. And by the way, you could do the toothpick thing with these guys to seal them up too. And a stuffed tied pork roast. All this under 20 bucks. How about that? So there you go, guys. If you like the video, give it a thumbs up, like it, share it. Please leave me some feedback down below. What are some cool things you do with your pork loin that I didn't think of for this video? Oh, and we have a little trim pile here too that you could save, vacuum package and save for grinding later. So there you go, guys. Let me know what you think.